All right, let's just dive right into part 2 of our explainer series. Today, we're unpacking that universal tension between municipal efficiency, getting things done quickly, and public transparency, doing things out in the open. We're going to use the MFRA, a steering committee, as our objective, real-world case study here. We're looking strictly at the legal and administrative framework surrounding this group just to understand a governance challenge that, honestly, almost every growing municipality faces at some point.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, the transparency dilemma. Second, defining a public body. Third, the 4 criteria test. Fourth, the advisory loophole. And finally, the risks of noncompliance. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The transparency dilemma. Let's look at the core issue local governments face when they try to form regional policies. I really want you to consider this question. When does a private municipal working group legally transform into a statutory public body? I mean, it sounds like just a minor shift in vocabulary, right? But legally, the gap between those two things is massive. And actually, this exact distinction is the absolute crux of the entire governance dispute we're looking at today. This breakdown really hits the nail on the head. On one hand, informal working groups are private, they're fast-moving, and they're great for internal coordination. Municipal leaders usually prefer this speed. You can just bounce ideas around without every single word going on the public record. But then you have statutory public bodies. These require open meetings, public notices, formal minutes, the whole shebang, because taxpayers have a legal right to this transparency when major policies are being shaped. The real friction happens when a group acting informally is legally required to operate as a formal public body. Moving on to Section 2, defining a public body. Let's see how the state actually defines these terms in the law, completely ignoring whatever informal labels a municipality might want to use. Okay, so at the heart of all this is the Open Meetings Act, or the OMA. This is a state law designed specifically to prevent the secret formulation of public policy. Think of it as guaranteeing taxpayers a seat at the table. The law recognizes that you, the public, don't just have a right to know the final decision. You actually have a right to observe the entire process, the debates, the alternatives, how that decision was actually made. Now, in our MFRA case study, municipal leadership took a pretty firm stance regarding their regionalization meetings. Their stated position was literally that the steering committee is just a working group, not conducting public meetings, and therefore, quote, you are not invited. So they excluded the public based purely on this working group label. But here's the kicker. Legally, the state doesn't care what you call yourselves. They have a very specific, objective test to verify that claim. Which brings us to Section 3. The 4 criteria test under MCL 15.262. Let's apply the state statutory criteria objectively to the MFRA steering committee. To actually trigger the Open Meetings Act, a group usually needs to meet these 4 criteria. 1, a formal municipal mandate, like resolutions of support from participating towns. 2, the use of public funding. 3, members who are officially appointed or designated by public bodies. And 4, exercising a governmental function, like, say, formulating policy. And legal analysis of the MFERA steering committee, it points out that the group hits every single one of these marks. It was created by formal legislative acts, and its members were officially designated to shape regional emergency response policy. And take a look at this number, $5,000. This is probably the most concrete piece of the puzzle. Every single participating jurisdiction contributed a baseline entry fee of $5,000. That definitively meets the public funding criteria. Look, once you start pooling taxpayer money to fund an initiative, the legal argument that you're just some casual, informal working group, well, it becomes incredibly difficult to defend. Taxpayer money requires taxpayer visibility, period. That leads us to Section 4, the advisory loophole. Because when confronted with these criteria, municipal groups often try a different defense. They'll claim they're just advising the final city council, not making final decisions. This step-by-step pipeline shows exactly how an advisory committee operates. Step 1, they research policy options. Step 2, they narrow those options down. And Step 3, they present a limited choice for final council approval. But here's the inherent danger to public transparency. It's that critical middle step. If a committee looks at 10 potential options and then quietly throws out 8 of them behind closed doors without any public input, they're effectively making major policy decisions totally out of the public eye. Now, what's really fascinating here is the established legal precedent in Michigan, specifically cases like Pine Brook Warren and Booth Newspapers. The courts have explicitly ruled that, quote, narrowing of options is considered a final action. Meaning, if a committee narrows down choices before presenting them to a council for a simple rubber stamp vote, they are actively deliberating public policy. Actually, scratch that. They aren't just deliberating, they are deciding. Because of that, they must comply with the Open Meetings Act. You just can't use an advisory committee to launder policy decisions in secret.
Finally, Section 5, Risks of Noncompliance. Let's look at the legal and financial impact of ignoring these rules. So what happens if these legal warnings about the Open Meetings Act are just ignored? Well, the stakes for the municipalities are massive. Failing to provide public notice or keep minutes isn't just some minor administrative typo. It risks a literal circuit court injunction. A judge could completely invalidate the committee's entire body of work. Plus, there's what's known as the fait accompli trap. That's a scenario where things move so far along in private that by the time the public finally sees it, it's presented as a done deal. Without public scrutiny, initiatives can proceed without independently audited budgets, which ultimately just disenfranchises the very taxpayers who funded the whole thing. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought to really chew on. If the foundation of a regional public safety initiative is built in the dark, can the final outcome truly serve the public interest? Transparency isn't just some annoying legal hurdle or bureaucratic red tape. It's absolutely the bedrock of civic trust and accountability. When we understand the mechanics of things like the Open Meetings Act, we understand how to hold our local governments to the standard the law actually demands. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive, and keep asking the right questions about how your local policies are made.